First of all, how about the weather today, huh? Pretty fantastic. So thank you to the Viking gods for that little bit of benefit. So I titled this talk that the best way to predict the future is create it yourself. And I fundamentally believe that. I extremely enjoyed Chris's presentation and the other presentations today, and I agree with much of what you've said. But my life has been about focusing on, if you find a problem, go out there and solve it. And I do believe that every single problem that we face as humanity can be solved by the right application of technology, people, and capital. There's nothing that we can't overcome as a people. And we'll speak about that a little bit. So my passion started as a child during the Apollo age. I was born in '61, and I grew up during Apollo. And I knew my mission in life, my purpose on this planet, was to take humanity off-world. That is, during our lifetimes, not our children's, our lifetimes, that humanity would grow off-planet, and that thousands, millions of years from now, they'd look back at these next few decades as the moment in time where humanity became a multi-planetary species. And so that drove me. And I went to MIT and got a medical degree for the purpose of becoming an astronaut. And then I found out my chances were 1 in 1,000 of becoming an astronaut. And then even if I was selected, I'd have to be a really good boy and do exactly what I was told in order to get my chance to fly. And I said, that will never happen, and I'll never get a chance to do it that way. So I became committed to trying to do these things privately. And that drove part of the story I'll unveil with you here today. I started focusing and thinking about humanity and how we've evolved and how technology has been rapidly changing. And if you stop and you think about, for the hundreds of thousands of years or millions of years that we have been Homo sapiens, that we have evolved in a world that was effectively local and linear. What do I mean by that? Because it's important for you to understand this. Our brains evolved in a world that's local and linear. Local means that the world that we cared about was within a day's walk. That's all that mattered to us. We never saw more than that. Nothing beyond a day's walk affected us. And then it was linear. It meant that my great-great-grandparents, my parents, myself, my children, their children, all lived the same life. Nothing changed century to century, decade to decade. It was very slow, if any change at all. It might be that you would move with the seasons, or it might be that later on there would be a new lord or a new king, but life was pretty much flat. But the world that we live in today is global and exponential. So, Chris made the point that our brains are, in fact, evolved to think in a local and linear fashion. That's how we have physically and fundamentally, our neurochemistry has evolved. But the world is growing in a global and exponential manner. And Chris had a great example for what exponential means, and we don't think in exponential terms. For me, if I were to say I'm going to take 21 linear steps like this, counting them off, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, in 21 steps, I would end up about one end of the room to the other. But if I were to take 21 exponential steps, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, where would you think I would end up? Maybe I'd end up in Oslo, right? But the fact of the matter is, if I took 21 exponential steps, I'd end up in downtown Manhattan. And we just don't think that way. We don't, and so exponentials sneak up on us. And in fact, here's the world that our brains think in, linear growth, 1 through 10, but the reality is this is exponential growth. And much of the disruption that we're seeing in society today, where you have literally billion-dollar companies coming out of no place. My friend Chad Hurley, who started YouTube, built it on his credit cards and sold it to Google 18 months later for $1.6 billion out of no place, and now threatens television industries that are hundreds of years, or at least decades old. Or billion-dollar companies literally going out of business, whether it's film being replaced by digital or newspapers going down. This disruption is the difference between the way our brains have been hardwired to evolve and the way the world around us changes. So one of the things that I've started thinking about is how do we educate people in terms of exponential growth? And I'll circle back around at the end of my presentation to speak about that. I want to give you a few other examples of an exponential growth. So there is an exabyte is 1 billion gigabytes. It's just one of the terms. So it turns out that from the start of time through the end of 2003, the human race, digitally, has created about 5 exabytes of information. Just a point in reference. This year, the human race will create 5 exabytes in about 2 days. In 2013, we will create 5 exabytes in about 10 minutes. The rate of information growth is growing at an exponential rate. Another example that is really hard for us to intuit as a people. The technologies that I've studied and I focus on, and I'm going to come and give perhaps the hopeful vision of the future, because we do have these issues, and I have changed the way I live and the way I invest because of those futures. But there are technologies that are becoming information sciences, and anything that becomes an information science is on this Moore's law. And I'll speak about these 5 core technologies in just a little bit. But this is Moore's law. Many of you know Moore's law. You may not know the name, but you know the effect when you go and buy your computer, that every year or 18 months, the computer's about half as much or twice as fast. And what I want you to look at is this little curve. This is Moore's law between 1900 and 2000. Through recession, through depression, through wartime, through good time, the technology is marching along unaffected. Unaffected. It's just marching along year after year after year. The other thing which is important to note, and this comes from a friend of mine's book, Singularity is Near, Ray Kurzweil, is that, we start in punch cards and relays and vacuum tubes and transistors and integrated circuits, that every time a technology runs out of steam, meaning, oh my God, these vacuum tubes can't possibly be getting any faster, the human race invents a new paradigm, a new technology to keep Moore's laws going. And the new paradigm right now is 3-dimensional integrated circuits, which Intel just announced last year. So we're in our 5th, entering into our 6th paradigm of technology that's keeping this exponential growth growing. And so you'll see this in the next few charts. You've got a linear scale on the bottom here, but you have a log scale on the top. And a log scale, even in a flat line, means an exponential growth curve. So remember this. Let's look at a few other areas. This is DNA sequencing. Again, we have a log curve on the left and a linear curve, which means that you have the price, the cost in dollars for DNA sequencing per base pair is dropping exponentially. So in the year 1990, the US government said, we're going to sequence the human genome. And it announced this multi-billion-dollar human genome sequencing. And they said, we're going to sequence the human genome in the next decade. And by 1995, they had only sequenced about 2% of the human genome. And all the naysayers were saying, look, it doesn't work. Of course, we're not going to do this in 10 years. We're going to do this in 50 years. But on an exponential curve, at the 5-year mark, 2% is right on. You're just 5 or 6 doublings away from hitting 100%. And in fact, 2001, both the NIH and a friend, Craig Venter, sequenced the human genome against everybody's predictions that it could not be done. Again, because we all think in linear terms, but things were growing at exponential rates. So to address part of the issues, one perspective is on solar energy. This is a curve that looks at cost per watt of solar energy from 1975 to 2006 in this case. And you can see the exponential drop of the cost per watt of solar energy. Now, by itself, that's not enough. But if you look, in fact, at the exponential growth of production, the rate at which solar power is being produced around the world, it also is growing at an exponential rate, to the point that we are only about 10 to 15 years away from solar being able to produce all of the energy requirements on this planet. Now, here's the other interesting point. Read with me here. 274 million gigawatt years of solar energy hit the Earth. This is the total amount of solar energy hitting the surface of the Earth. It's easily calculatable. We consume, as humanity, at its peak, about 10,000 gigawatt years. The fact of the matter is there is about 10 to 20,000 times as much solar energy that hits the Earth's surface than humanity needs. So we have to convert 1/10,000th of that energy to meet all of our energy needs. Sure, there'll be challenges, but I put my bet on the capabilities of innovators to make this happen, because the price is so high if we don't. Here's a chart that when I first saw it stuck with me. The brain is a pattern recognition machine. We go around and we see patterns, our grandmother's face, the fjords, and we recognize patterns. And you can calculate how fast the brain operates as a pattern recognition machine. In scientific notation, it's 10 to the 16th cycles per second, about 10 million billion cycles per second. It turns out that the average $1,000 laptop, like the one running this presentation, calculates today at about 10 to the 11th cycles per second, which means, using Moore's law, in about 20 years, we are going to have the average $1,000 laptop being able to calculate at the same rate as the human brain. So what happens to your kids doing their homework when their computer can do it for them instantly? Probably better. Go forward 20 years later, when the average $1,000 laptop can calculate at the rate of the entire human race. What is life like in 20 years or 40 years? Put aside the issues of energy or depleted resources. We're talking about the complete and total reinvention of what it is for society to exist. And I think we're on this flat part of the curve where people don't recognize the immense impact of reinventing everything that we do. So going back to some of these technologies, the computer and network systems, we are going to soon have embedded networks and computers everywhere, embedded in our clothing, embedded in our bodies, embedded in every piece of furniture, where they do all speak to each other, and they all do reconfigure, and they're all intelligent. The new internet protocol that we've adopted has enough IP addresses to, in fact, make every atom in the universe IP addressable, let alone every device on this planet. My wife Kristen and I were out fishing on a boat not too far from here for cod, and we weren't catching anything. And I sort of at that moment pulled out my BlackBerry and started Googling cod fishing, and realized that cod were lazy fish sitting on the bottom. So we changed our lure and put a weight on it, and we caught 2 cod half an hour later. So the ability to have instant information and instant access is tremendous. Artificial intelligence and robotics are going to completely change. Talk about the issue of unemployment. Talk about jobs being displaced to China. What happens when, in fact, robots working 24/7 perfectly are what labor is competing against? This image in the upper right is a friend of mine who was one of the early Googlers who took his $1 billion of wealth and is building this company, Willow Garage. And that's something called the PR2, the Personal Robot 2. That's a fully functioning anthropomorphic robot that can move around. And what he said to me, before we have AI, artificial intelligence, to drive these robots, what we're really going to have is telepresence, where if you want someone to be cleaning your house at night, we'll simply allow someone in Africa or India who wants a job to enter this robot and be a telepresence to do your labor at night, time-shifted 12 hours. Create a labor market there and provide you efficiency at $2 for having cleaned your home, but $2 that make them extraordinarily wealthy in their local community. Biotech and bioinformatics, you've heard about Craig Venter creating synthetic life just a month ago. A fundamental breakthrough when you consider that at the end of the day, biologically programming is going to displace when we program computers. If you want a robot to go and clean your carpets, It might be better to build a biological robot that goes and eats lint and dust and pees stain remover. I mean, we are going to be dealing with ethical issues and reinventions that's going to challenge everything in our lives. Nanomaterials, medicine and neurosystems. I'm one of the people who believe that we will have multi-100-year lifespans. That we will be able to, the technology that exists right now that's in the lab, to take one of your skin cells, turn it into a pluripotent stem cell, and then be able from that stem cell to grow any of the 100+ tissue types that you need. Your pancreas, lung, liver, kidney, heart, what do you need? That impossibility will be adapted into our society as, in fact, a God-given right. Probably not 100 years from now, probably 20 years from now. This is a good friend of mine, Gene Cernan. Gene was the last man to stand on the moon. This is a photo taken in December 1972, and he's jumping off. And the impressive thing is he's about a meter off of the moon, but he's wearing about 200 kilograms of equipment on his back. And he said, Peter, if we could have gone to the moon in 1969, after 8 years, you tell me what's impossible. Nothing is impossible. And I fundamentally believe that we can, in fact, take those things on. And the beautiful thing about the Apollo program, just to note, was that the average age of the engineers in 1961 who left their jobs, left university, went to go work for it, were not in their 30s or 40s. They were in their mid to late 20s. And they were given a job where there was no one to tell them what could not be done. And they invented everything that was required. In 8 years, under that race, they went and made it happen. So what I believe is possible, in fact, is the creation of a world of abundance, where all 5 or 6 billion people have everything they need, the food, the water, the housing, the clothing, anything they need to live at standards of living that are appropriate. So one of the forces driving this is called the bottom billion coming online, and we heard a little bit about this with Linda. And the notion is that, here are some of the numbers, again, an exponential curve. In 2000, 2% penetration of cell phones in Africa. And here you see the African warriors with their cell phones. Last year, 28% penetration in Africa. By 2013, over 70%, and the numbers are argued could be as high as 80%. But this is one of the largest markets for companies like Nokia. So what happens when 1 billion new people become online, when they come into contact, when they add their thinking to society? When 1 billion new people all of a sudden start communicating with us, consuming, and contributing, 20% of a new marketplace. Fundamentally, what's going to happen is substantial innovation. Because all innovation is new people with new ideas, getting information and recombining it in a different fashion. It may be, in fact, that the telephone penetration in Africa is one of the most important things that our society ever does to drive innovation in new markets. But what also is going to happen is that these individuals are going to start to make demands on consumables that they need, are going to start to become part of the economy, and lift the economy and start to consume and start to raise their world into a life of abundance. The other way about driving abundance is incentivizing breakthroughs, driving fundamental breakthroughs, like the Green Revolution that fed India when it was on the verge of starvation. So what drives breakthroughs? And I've thought about this. One of the biggest drivers is fear, and the concerns about fuel, about resource depletion, all of these things is a huge driver of breakthroughs. Another is curiosity. Is there life out there in the universe? Curiosity, unfortunately, is a weak motivator. You can actually measure the ratio of fear to curiosity as a motivator in society. It's the ratio of the defense budget to the science budget, at least in the United States. Wealth creation. The fact that we have the ability to build an oil platform here in Norway and shift it on the other side of the planet and go down through 10,000 feet of water into the seafloor and then drill down another 4 to 10 or 15,000 feet is incredible. In 1984, when Shell made the first bet they found the first large deposit off the coast of Mexico. They had no idea what the quality was. They had no idea if they could actually build the technology. They bet $1 billion to build that first, to go and drill for the first time. And it paid off. And now the average drilling expeditions are $5 billion to $50 billion for deep sea drilling. And the fourth driver is significance. The human soul, the need to be significant in your lifetime, to go from having success to significance. And it was actually this story of Charles Lindbergh that I read about. Family from Sweden came to the US. Charles grew up in the era of aviation. And in 1919, a Frenchman who was living in New York offered up a $25,000 prize for the first person who could fly between New York and Paris. And Charles Lindbergh read about this prize and said, I'm going to do it. He'd been flying for 2 years. He was 25 years old at the time. No one would sell him an airplane. No one would sell him an engine because they were afraid he was going to kill himself going after this prize. But in fact, 9 different teams spent $400,000 to try and win this $25,000 prize. And so I'm reading this book called The Spirit of St. Louis, and I'm making notes in the margins. I'm going, oh my God, so this guy puts up $25,000. He doesn't pay anybody who loses, and he automatically pays the winner. And he gets $400,000 spent to try and win this $25,000 prize. What great returns. The guy's brilliant. So, remember my childhood passion of wanting to fly into space. At the end of reading the book, the idea had come to me about I'm going to create a prize for private spaceflight. I called it the XPrize because I had no idea it was going to put up the money. So X was a variable to be replaced by the name of the person who put up the $10 million. $10 million was enough money to attract entrepreneurs. I didn't want the Boeings and the Lockheeds or the Airbuses competing. I wanted people with new ideas coming in. It had to be privately funded, so you're worried about every cent being spent. A 3-person spaceship meant that at the end of the competition, you'd have a vehicle that can go into commercial practice with a pilot and 2 paying passengers, or an autopilot and 3 very brave passengers. 100 kilometers altitude, come back down, and within 2 weeks, do it again. Amazingly, we had 26 teams around the world from 7 nations who spent $100 million to win this $10 million prize. And we gave birth to a new generation of spaceships. On the day that this competition was won, Northrop Grumman came in and purchased the company that built the spaceship, and Richard Branson came in and licensed the technology to create Virgin Galactic. We were on the cover of Google, which was very cool, almost took down our website when they linked to it. We had 6 billion media impressions, which was great for us, because one of the things our goal was to change the paradigm, to change the way people thought about space travel, to say it's not just for governments anymore. Each and every one of you can travel into space if that's what you choose to do. And the winning vehicle ended up in the Air and Space Museum. So let me show you a short video of what that experience was like. We're announcing today something called the XPrize, a $10 million contest to privately build a spaceship that's able to carry 3 individuals, fly to 100 kilometers altitude, and do that twice inside of 2 weeks.
By defining the challenge with the Ansari XPrize, the XPrize Foundation ignited a new race to space, luring teams from around the globe.
We're based in Mojave, California.
Israel, Oklahoma,
Forks, Washington, Romania.
Acting as the catalyst, the XPrize Foundation demonstrated an incentivized competition can change the world.
Hello and welcome to Mojave here in the high desert of California on this incredible day. Now you are going to witness history in the making. And there it goes.
The Ansari XPrize inspired international competition, drove regulatory reform, and made history, dramatically demonstrating that space travel was not exclusively the province of government.
The XPrize for $10 million.
It ignited a personal spaceflight revolution.
I understand. Yeah. Thank you. I understand you had Mike Melville come and speak here at InnoTown before. Mike flew two of those flights, and Brian Binney flew the winning flight on October 4th, 2004. So let me tell you about another prize to give you an example of how incentive prizes work. Between 1980 and 2000, the U.S. Defense Department spent about $200 million trying to build autonomous vehicles, trucks and cars that would drive themselves through the deserts on supply lines. And they weren't able to get the results. The vehicles could only do the easy parts. They could only travel 3 or 5 miles an hour. They weren't able to get these cars that really were autonomous and driving quickly. So in about 2003, DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, announced a program called the DARPA Grand Challenge, offered up $1 million the first year, $2 million the second year, for a team that could build a fully autonomous car, a car that could drive itself, but this time they had to go 130 miles at 35 miles an hour or greater, and do it 100% autonomously. In the first year, nobody won. Okay. In the second year, of the 25 teams that competed, 8 of them pulled it off. Now, what was interesting was that the team that won, and here you see it pulling over the finish line, was a group out of Stanford called Stanley. This was a group of graduate students, about 25 of them, who had only started 1 year earlier and spent a total of $500,000. So, and they won the $2 million the second year. So the idea that new teams and new ideas can come in, that for 20 years and $200 million and thousands of human years, there were few or no results. And then you have a team that comes with a completely different approach. Yes, building on the technology of the past, but a team of 25 grad students with $500,000 and 1 year of time and pulls it off spectacularly. That's innovation. That's what we try to incentivize. So when we're designing new incentive prizes at XPrize Foundation, we're about 45, 50 people in Los Angeles right now, with operations starting in India and other parts of the US and eventually into Europe. These are our interests. We're looking for areas that are market failures. Things are stuck. Things are not progressing. We don't know why, but they're stuck. We try and create a set of clear, measurable, objective rules. The first person to pull this off wins. Something that's hard but attainable. We define the problem, what you have to do, but not how to get there. We're open to all solutions. We don't want to prejudge how you're going to bring about a real breakthrough idea. Looking for something to be 1 in 3 to 8 years. Less than 3 years was probably too easy. More than 8 years, no one cares anymore. We make sure there's a back-end business model so the winning teams can go into business, start a new industry, and open to innovation around the world. If we do our job right, we are really attracting maverick thinkers. We make the teams into heroes. The teams don't do this only for the money. The money is a minor part. They're doing it because it's a passion in their hearts. They were born to do this. We give them the platform for them to take their crazy ideas, because remember, the day before something is truly a breakthrough, it's a crazy idea. If it was not a crazy idea the day before, it'd be an incremental improvement. But computing on silicon, when you've been using vacuum tubes, that's a crazy idea. So we allow for failure. In fact, you celebrate failure as well as success. You encourage intelligent risk-taking and change the paradigm of what is possible. That fundamentally is what we're trying to do with every one of our prizes. Change what people believe. When Lindbergh crossed the Atlantic in 1927, the number of people flying in airplanes went up 30-fold. In 1927, 6,000 people flew in airplanes. In 1929, it was 180,000. It wasn't like aviation got easier, or the air got thicker, or gravity got less. People said, oh my God, if this 25-year-old kid can do it, I can do it too. And he changed what people believed was possible. So if we do our job right with an incentive prize, we can get high leverage. 10 to 40 times the purse is spent to try and win the prize. You only pay the winner, it's efficient. And you can spark a new industry. This was the leverage we got with the Ansari XPrize. The St. Louis community gave us our seed money of $2.5 million. The Ansari family came forward with the $10 million. The team spent $100 million. And since the prize was won, over $1 billion has been invested in that industry. Because the investment capital comes in. They see the dream all of a sudden that everyone has been telling them about, but now they believe. So we have started developing XPrizes, again, to try and drive this world of abundance, to try and solve these big problems in 4 areas: life sciences, exploration, energy and environment. We just announced Cisco has come on as our major partner there. We're talking to companies about partnering with us in life sciences and exploration, education, global development. We have about $50 million in active prizes, and you'll see this double and triple very quickly over the years ahead. So one of the prizes today is for rapid human genome sequencing. In 2001, when the genome was sequenced as predicted, it cost about $1 billion. Craig Venter, who was competing at the same time and sequenced his genome, spent $100 million in a year of time for one genome. So this is a $10 million prize for the first team who can sequence 100 human genomes in 10 days. And when that happens, that's just the beginning of an era of personalized medicine. Talk about a healthcare crisis we have today. What if instead of spending all your money at the end of your life after you're sick, you spend a small amount of money before you become sick, preventing yourself from becoming sick, because you understand what is likely to happen from your genome and your proteome. The next prize we launched is the Google Lunar XPrize. Google put up $30 million in prize money. And all you have to do to win this, $30 million, is build a robot, fly it and land it on the surface of the moon, send back photos and videos, rove a half a kilometer and send back more photos and videos. So we have 21 teams from around the world. And when they do this, not if they do this, when they do this, they will bring down the price of going to the moon by a factor of probably 50 to 100. Now, what's interesting about that? Chris talked about resource depletion. Well, if you think of the Earth by itself, of course we'll deplete it. I mean, why wouldn't we? We're raising the standards of living and so forth. But the Earth is a crumb in a supermarket filled with resources called our solar system, called our galaxy. Why do we stop and we think so flat and linear about, oh, this is the Earth and that's all we can do? Did Europe think about that when it started looking towards the west, towards the Americas? Or when America started looking towards the west and towards Alaska? And why shouldn't we look out there towards the cosmos? There are millions of asteroids circling the sun. Some of these asteroids are energetically much easier to get to than the moon. There's a particular a particular metal chondrite, which is hundreds, if not thousands of times more enriched in rare earth metals than the Earth's crust is. Our ability to go and capture these, an average half-kilometer asteroid of this particular type, is worth about $20 to $30 trillion in rare earth metals. So we may exhaust things here, but that will simply drive us to go and create the capability to get them elsewhere. I mean, if you stop and you went back 200 years ago and you said, well, we're going to go and grab oil out of the deepest parts of the ocean, they would have thought you're crazy. Or build a pipeline from Alaska? So when I talk about going and getting resources from the asteroids, it's no more difficult. It's simply a matter of engineering and time and planning, and we will do those things. If someone else doesn't, I'll make sure I'll go do it. It's a great business. The other company XPrize we've started is called the Progressive Automotive XPrize. It's for a new generation of super efficient cars. I want to change the paradigm of the cars we drive. Not it's either beautiful and expensive or ugly and efficient. Why can't you have a car that does it all? That's safe, affordable, manufacturable, beautiful, and oh, by the way, gets over 100 miles per gallon or its energy equivalent. So this is a competition that's in its final 90 days. And in September, we're going to be announcing the winners of the Progressive Automotive XPrize. And let me show a short video about this.
Hi everybody, I'm very excited about this Automotive XPrize because where we are in this century is about the same place we were in the last century. When you go back to the Model T or any of those cars, they were looking for the magic 25 to 35 miles per gallon, just like we are now. Well, that's not good anymore. Now we got too many cars and too much blue smoke. So what we want to do is get rid of the blue smoke, have something that's fun, sexy, gets 100 miles per gallon, and is environmentally friendly. And that's what this is all about.
Well, I'll skip the rest of this video. Sorry. But where we are right now is we had 136 vehicles enter this competition from 21 countries around the world. These vehicles are 4-seat, 4-wheel, and 3-seat, 2-wheel vehicles. And we're down to the top 30 vehicles that are competing in and around Detroit at the International Motor Speedway. And we're going to be announcing 3 winners come September. And my hope and belief is that we're going to show the world a new generation of vehicles, and that these vehicles will go into production and hopefully begin the process Chris spoke about displacing the vehicles that are out there. But at the same time, we have to think about changing our economy from fuel and petrol to electric, especially if solar begins. And one of the things that we're proud about in this competition is we created a new metric by which cars are measured. Instead of MPG, miles per gallon, or liters per gallon, the metric we've created by which this competition is being judged is called MPGE, miles per gallon equivalent, so that you can compare electric and hybrid and gasoline and biodiesel and so forth. So one of the other competitions that XPrize is doing, and you'll hear about in the years ahead, is something we call XChallenges. And rather than $10 million or larger competitions, we are also doing competitions that are $1 million, typically 1 to 2 year technology demos. And we recently did this one for a new generation of lunar landers along with NASA and Northrop Grumman. So let me talk about some of the ideas for prizes that we're focusing on going forward. So these are prizes we're working on. These are not funded yet, but they're near and dear to my heart. For the developing world, the AI Physician XPrize. Imagine, if you would, a $10 million competition for a team that can build an artificial intelligence that can speak and listen in natural language. That technology exists, not perfected, but it's coming online, and in 5 years we will have it without any question. And that AI needs to be able to diagnose any patient as good or better than a set of 10 board-certified doctors. So what you do is you set up 10 doctors in a room and the AI physician. Outside of the room are 10 patients. The patients come in one at a time. All the doctors and the AI ask questions. They listen to the answers. At the end of, say, 20 or 30 minutes, you write down what you think the patient has and what they think they should do. The patient leaves. All 10 patients come through. The moment at which that AI is able to get it right, as good or better than the 10 board-certified doctors, that AI physician wins the competition. The beautiful thing is, anyone with a cell phone then has access to that, literally for free. And that AI speaks Swahili and Mandarin and any language you wish. Transform access to healthcare. Along with this, there's a whole set of prize technologies about lab on a chip, a Band-Aid that can diagnose your blood chemistry as well. We're literally in this next 10 years, are going to reinvent healthcare in a fundamental fashion. We're looking at a plastics XPrize. Many of you might have known about or hear about the large gyres of plastic in the oceans, because we are literally dumping hundreds of millions of tons of plastic into the ocean that don't biodegrade. So we're in discussions right now for the creation of an Oceans XPrize for a new generation of clear plastic that can biodegrade in the salinity and temperature and UV radiation of the oceans. Bionics XPrize. So the notion here would be for a team to build and demonstrate a set of bionic legs that can go on to a person who has lost their legs or lost use of their legs, a paraplegic, or in fact that by 2020 we're going to have 100 million people over the age of 80 who are going to need help ambulating, because as soon as you're stuck in a wheelchair and unable to move around, that's when you become dependent on society. So imagine a competition where you take a person who's lost use of their legs, and this is a competition to have that person literally race up and down a mountain. Low-cost housing XPrize. Again, elements that will bring us a world of abundance. Working with folks at Habitat for Humanity. So this would be an XPrize for a team that could build a 500 square foot house in under 12 hours that has door, window, toilet, internet, stove, light, and sustainable energy, meaning solar, survive earthquakes and winds and floods. But you have to be able to build literally 50 in 25 days. We're looking to redesign how houses are built because it's been the same for the last 100 years. There's been few fundamental changes. Autonomous car XPrize. So I had a chance to speak with Chris about this over a glass of wine, that the future of cars for me is we're going to stop owning cars. A car will become a resource that you use when you need it. You need a Lamborghini for your date, a Lamborghini drives up and you hop in. You need a large truck to go out backing in the fjords, the truck pulls in, where they're fully autonomous, where you save tens of thousands of lives, millions of lives from auto accidents. Can you imagine a control system? Imagine designing a piece of technology where if you sneeze and move the control surface, you die. So autonomous cars, I think people are in fact one of the most inefficient mechanisms to drive a car. We have millisecond delay. The future is for autonomous cars, and this is a competition for us, where this would be a race for the first autonomous car to beat a top-seeded driver in a Grand Prix race. So this is basically the man versus machine for autonomous cars. Ocean floor mapping. Jim Cameron, who's one of our advisors here, we've talked about this in the next prize, mapping 1,000 square kilometers of the deepest part of the ocean, an average of 3,000 feet at 1 meter resolution in 10 days. So that would be, the question is not how do they do it, but doing it. Not prejudging how they make that happen, whether it's swarms of autonomous robots or new seawater penetrating optics. This deep ocean submersible is the equivalent of the Ansari XPrize. Instead of taking 2 or 3 people up into space twice in 2 weeks, this would be for a 2-person sub plus payload or a 3-person sub that can descend to the Marianas Trench, carry on 2 kilometers on the bottom, stay down there for 6 to 8 hours, and then repeat the dive 4 times over 8 days. So we're just now beginning to talk with sponsors and philanthropists about who would want to sponsor and drive this kind of a technology. We're looking at electric aircraft XChallenges, an annual 2,500 kilometer race for the fastest 2-person all-electric aircraft. One of the favorite ones we're going to be launching very shortly is a vision surrogate. For the longest time, people who are blind have either a dog or a cane. We want to be able to develop a technology that a blind person can hold it up and explore the world, can see where the open seats are, can see where the exit is, can see where the street number is, and give them the technology to navigate and be a part of society. I think once this is launched, we'll see a winner of this in 1 or 2 years. I'm going to close in this idea. We talked about the fact that we don't think in exponential terms, but in fact, the disruptive part is between the way we think and the exponential growth. So a year and a half ago, I had the pleasure, along with Ray Kurzweil, of starting a new university called Singularity University, which is backed by NASA and Google and Autodesk and ePlanet Ventures. We're based in the heart of Silicon Valley, actually on the campus of NASA Ames. Those are our buildings. And we focus on 2 programs, a global graduate student program and exponential technology executive programs. Our mission is to assemble, educate, and inspire people about exponential technologies and how to use those technologies to address humanity's grand challenges. So when you come to Singularity University, you basically, independent of where you come from, if you're an engineer, a doctor, a lawyer, no matter what you're studying for, you come in and you learn about all the exponential technologies. You learn about what's in the lab today, in 5 years, in 10 years, what's coming to market. We take you to the companies in Silicon Valley that are building all of this technology so you can meet with them and say, well, what are you going to be doing in 10 years? What's coming to market in 20 years? Because if you're designing companies and you're designing it based on the technology today, you've lost. You have to be designing on the technology that's coming to market in 5 years so you can intercept it. So you learn about the technology tracks, you also learn about the future studies, policy, finance, and then we apply it on energy and environmental systems and space and physical sciences. And this is the program that we run. It's a 10-week graduate program, and it basically, you learn about the core curriculums, and then you focus it on a team project during the summer. And the team projects are called 10 to the 9th plus. And we ask the students, how do you positively affect 1 billion people in 10 years? And don't focus on any project that cannot have the potential to affect 1 billion people in 10 years. Last year, the students started 4 companies that were angel financed. And this is our growth. We had 1,200 applications for 40 slots, 1,600 applications for 80 slots this year, and we'll keep the program going. We focus on students who are at the top of their university, have started companies, they are entrepreneurs, and they're interested in the world's grand challenges. Our faculty come from Cisco, Google, Intel, around Silicon Valley. And I mentioned as well, we have a graduate student program, and I'll just mention it. We take about an executive program, we take about 30 to 40 executives every quarter, and we run a 4-day or a 9-day program. And during that, it's focusing on what technologies may wipe out your company, or what technologies that are coming online could transform your company. This was our last class, and I was, while 90% highly recommended it, 30% says the best program ever. That was pretty cool. The website, for those of you who want to learn more, is just singularityu.org. So I'll close on this slide and this note. We are living in disruptive times, no question at all. There is going to be extraordinary change, and I agree, the next 20 years are going to be unlike anything else that's happened. It may be, in part, because of the greed, the confusion, the depletion. It may also be because we are at a knee in the curve of technology that is changing at such a rate and such a pace that we can't even understand the rate and pace it's changing at. That governments will be unable to regulate, unable to control, unable to see what's coming down. That billion-dollar companies are going to come out of no place, and billion-dollar companies are going to fall like flies. And that the ability to be nimble, and we heard about this from Rohit and from Linda and from many other folks, of reinventing the future. It is going to be dramatic. But I also believe that we have the ability to use that technology for good, to give us a world of abundance, where every human, where poverty is no longer, I'll leave on this one last thought. People who have poverty today, when they have a toilet, running water, and a light bulb, would have been considered royalty 1,000 years ago. So we're redefining this thing, and we can change the lives of everybody on this planet. And I believe that every problem we have on this planet can be solved. Thank you.
Peter Diamandis, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Peter.